What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Brian Buccellato. Welcome back to the show.
How you doing, man? It's been a while.
It has. I feel like last time I had you on, it was right around when Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong was about to come out. You were in the midst of mid-year, midlife crisis.
Mhm.
And Chicken Devils is wrapping up and things like that. So like it's been a while. So like you've got some stuff going on, you've got some more projects going on. So what have you been doing since we've last talked? Tell the people.
I've been working on the sequel to Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong that just dropped yesterday, so people seem to like it so far. There you go. Yeah, yeah. So the first issue dropped, and I've got that new creator-owned book from Mad Cave called Eat Your Young. So those are the two comic book things that I've been
Okay.
focusing on lately.
Let's hop right into your work at DC here. People will know you for a while. You've been around there for a while with Flash and things like that. And you got into this Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong. And now we're in the second volume. Did you have any anticipation that you were going to have a second volume when this, first approached this project? Or
I
when did
mean,
this come about?
not in the beginning of the series. I think by the second or third issue when it was selling really well and it was getting a lot of positive word of mouth and going back to reprints and stuff like that there it started becoming a conversation that hey we may want to do a sequel and so so I quickly thought of what made sense to me as like the most obvious way to do a sequel, which is to go into the legendary Earth and have Justice League, on be the away team for a change, you know.
Yeah. How did that change anything? Like how far along were you of writing the first volume when you knew you had a second? Did you hold anything back then, or like no, this was the story you wanted to tell from the get-go, and you just were like, I gotta figure out another avenue then?
Yeah, I mean, like I basically threw everything but the kitchen sink in the first
Right, you did. That's what I was
volume.
like.
I say that I apologize to Christian because I just threw so many things like by the last two issues that it just was like jam packed with like everything. I didn't know, for sure that we were going to get a second volume because there's like legalities
Right.
involved. There's two entities that have to make a deal. So I didn't hold anything back. But I did in my mind reserve some concepts that are now going to be seen in the sequel.
Yeah. You mentioned you have to apologize to Christian, your artist on this book. And I want to say it was the last issue. I still remember just staring at the double page spread that you had the one time of like you have like a mech Batman suit, you have a mech Lex Godzilla suit that Lex is powering. You've got all the monsters, and then you've got the some of the grounds, the
Yeah.
ground level superheroes in the foreground. Like, and that is a stunning page, and I'm like just in awe of it. So like I can imagine Christian had fun doing that, but also was like, oh my gosh, Brian.
Thankfully, he's really good at what he does, so
Yes.
he was able to put the best foot forward for sure, man. Like I love that. I know exactly which one you're talking about. It's like there's like a panel at the bottom that shows
Yep.
the human-sized people, and then the whole rest of the double is uh the sort of cityscape with all the big
Yeah.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you like you said, you in the first volume, you threw everything that you had, in this. Was there a part for you where you had to kind of, I don't want to say hold back, or were there things that you couldn't do because like, you're dealing with two entities, right? With, the
Sure.
Legendary Comics and DC that you're like, I can't do everything I want, but because it seems like you got to do kind of whatever you wanted being separated from the DC universe, really, of the main continuity.
Yeah, I mean, I think once everyone's on board with the fact that it's
Yeah.
Elseworld, and you're not having to compete with current continuity, I think that just opens the door to a lot of things. Like I was able to choose my versions of the various Justice League members, like, New 52 Flash or Christopher Reeve Superman, or, Teen Titans, George Perez, like whatever, like, like all my favorite, what I thought were the classic versions of the character. That's what I wanted to use. So that's why I think it has a very sort of Super Friends vibe, even though I mean it's
Mhm.
not like simplistic like Super Friends was, but I was going for those vibes because I think they're timeless, they're universal, and people I think frankly crave those versions
Yeah.
because so many like there's darker versions of characters, there's crazy continuity, so I think sometimes it's nice just to have like the version that you think when you think of a character real quick, you know.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this interview or watching this interview and you haven't read Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong, the first volume, you're getting a little bit spoiled here because we got to talk, to get into the second here. So pause that and go back and read that. But you have moments in that first volume with, you know, Kong getting the Green Lantern ring and those moments where it's like you've got to have your inner kids got to be like super excited as a nerd. And I know
Yeah.
talking to you growing up, these have been some of your favorite, universes as well to have those moments. Like that's got to be cool when you get to actually see Godzilla, not Godzilla, Kong with the Green Lantern ring on.
Yeah, first of all, it was a blast, the most fun I've ever had writing IP, just because,
Right.
it just some of it writes itself, right? I've said before that if you have Skull Island and you have Green Arrow, they're gonna, that's peanut butter and chocolate, throw a Green Arrow on an island. You have a super powerful uh, hero who's a blonde, sounds like that's up Kong's alley. There's just certain things,
Yeah.
Lex Luthor obviously is gonna build Mecha Godzilla, you know. So there's just some stuff that, as a fan, as a kid, was really easy to connect the dots. In terms of Kong with the Green Lantern ring, it actually wasn't even my idea. It was the editor, Ben Abernathy, because I didn't think we'd ever get it approved.
Oh
So,
wow.
so we were talking about who's going to get the ring, because that's why I killed the guy, Guy Gardner's, because I wanted to give somebody else the ring in the climax. And he's like, "Well, why don't we try? And why don't we try it?" And Legendary, to their credit, like they approved it. So.
That's so that's so good. And now this is a universe like that you've worked with Legendary of doing stuff before the kind of this project. What was it? Because I know remember from our past conversations, but where was it for you, where you kind of fell in love with these characters of Godzilla and Kong?
It all goes back to my childhood. I am a latchkey kid from the 70s and 80s, um, watched King Kong, during the holidays. I think it's Thanksgiving that they used to show it. Every Thanksgiving they would show Mighty Joe Young, King Kong, and Son of Kong. And so like that was like an annual thing, seeing that. And then you have like there used to be the 4 o'clock movie,
Mm,
uh, like movies of the week. So like it would be like Godzilla week or James Bond week or Planet of the Apes week. I think, like when in that period of time when there was no cable and there was no on demand, it was like that was your only opportunity to see these things. So like I remember like running home and making sure that that we had dibs on the TV because the 4 o'clock movie and it was Godzilla week, um so like it's a very childlike love for those characters that date back to to way back when, and then you know getting you know getting to actually write them. Like, when asked if I want to write one of those characters, it's like obviously hell yeah.
right. So if someone's, hasn't gotten a chance to pick up the second volume, issue one just dropped yesterday at the time of this recording. What kind of was your elevator pitch for going into this new volume that you wanted to do? You kind of hinted at it already, but expand on that a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I think so in the first series, I had wanted to see if we could get Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra, but because of the way the contracts worked and the deal was already signed, I couldn't. So in series one, Batman faces off against Camazotz, which is like this bat character, bat Titan. I wanted that to be Rodan originally. That's one of the few things that I didn't, that I wasn't able to do what I originally envisioned. Like
Yeah.
most everything else, I think, was smooth sailing. But so I think for the second story, that was like front and center. It was like, hey, can we have these characters? And so we worked those into the deal, and of course, that to me that meant, another reason to put it on Legendary Earth, where these characters are. Um, and so that was a big thing. And then just finding a new way into the story. If you've light spoilers for like issue one, it revolves around, the beginning revolves around Barry Allen getting married, whereas in the first series it was Clark asking Lois to marry him, and so I wanted to sort of keep that sort of like personal, heartwarming story going. But instead of just carrying Superman again, I just want to give it a slightly different feel, and just to give other characters an opportunity to shine. So that's present in this storyline, and then it's just raising the stakes in terms of the bad guys, and so. We've got Amanda Waller and Suicide Squad slash Task Force X, who have basically co-opted a bunch of members from the Legion of Doom against their will, and they have, plans to, Amanda's not happy that there was big, Titans roaming the Earth, so she wants to find a way to counteract that in the future.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned it, the story of in the previous one of Superman proposing to Lois, um, you have these epic battles, right? Like, because that's what you want with when you have Justice League and Godzilla and Kong, but you also bring a lot of heart to the story. There's a lot of moments that like you cheer and you go, yes, let's go, and like where it tugs on your emotion. How important is it for you to have your big action? Because you know people want the big action, but also having those emotional tugs and pulls of storytelling for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, from a writer's standpoint, it's more interesting
Yeah.
to, you know, the least interesting thing for a writer to write is the action sequence. A lot of times it's because it's hard because you want to try and top all the other action sequences that ever were. So that's a challenge unto itself. Um, but then, it's really the artist who's allowed to take to shine there because it's their I mean, they do the heavy lifting,
Mhm.
especially in the action. Um, and so for me, writing the dialogue, the character work, even if it's like banter and jokey or if it's something heartfelt, like that's where the fun for me lives. And so I try to, infuse as much as I can while still giving people the action because nobody wants to see 7 issues of talking heads talking about Godzilla and Kong.
Right. Well, and you've got to be also then as a fan, right? As because you are writing these things, like you have a love for these characters because it shows on the pages that you're writing. Because you have these moments. Do you have to do a lot of prep work, or is this, like digging into who these characters are, whether it's from the Legendary universe or from the DC universe, or are you just really pulling into, that you've worked so long in these worlds that you're like, I kind of know the stories I want to tell.
Well, I mean, I think in the specific case of these characters, I've worked on them, for a number of years. Like
Yeah.
I did even the legendary stuff. I did Kong and Godzilla material for legendary, and then I think the biggest asset for me going into it was having done 2.5 years of Injustice because I got to use the whole DC Universe cast, at least the people that Tom Taylor hadn't killed at the time. So that was a sort of like in some ways like a training ground
Mhm.
in using a big cast with the big sort of epic event. I did a little bit of that also in Forever Evil, getting to do the Rogues mini and deal with a lot of characters that way. But I think anytime you're hired to write IP, you owe it to yourself and to people who are employing you and to the fans to understand what you're writing and at least give it a shot, right? Like if you
Yeah.
don't know the characters well enough, research, you should always try to understand who they are and what their motivations are, where they come from. Like what's the core of, why is Batman Batman? Why does Superman Superman? I think once you do that, you can respect who they are, and then you can take it in fun newish directions, after 75 years, like there's so many stories told. Um, it's tough to do something completely new, but
Right.
you can still be true to, you can still, it can still feel fresh and new and interesting as long as you're maintaining, sort of or honoring, I should say, what came before.
Do you find, especially when you're working with IP, that having the restraints of it being an Elseworld, that you get to have a little bit more freedom, it seems. Does that make it easier for storytelling than of like trying to stick into like a continuity?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Like I mean, it's not even close because, continuity has a whole bunch of guardrails,
Yeah.
I think back to when Francis Manapul and I did Detective Comics after our, I think, second arc. They did that whole thing with Jim Gordon becoming Batman, and so like we had to throw away all of our plans because Bruce Wayne was going to be gone and out of the picture. And so like that's like an extreme case where it's
Yeah,
like, we're working on a character and we're working on these stories, and then suddenly it's like, you know what, you can't have the main character for the next 6 months.
yeah, that's got to be
So
tough.
but that's just the way it is. Like that's
Yeah,
life, you know.
yeah,
But in Elseworlds, you know, I can say that Barry and Iris are not married, and Iris doesn't know his secret identity.
and nobody can get upset because it's a story you're getting to want to tell, and
Yeah, and if DC editorial has no issue with it,
yeah,
then it's just a different version. It's just a different version of that world. But all the pieces are there, and you should recognize them, and hopefully feel like, wow, that was fun to take that trip, or go back to this point in time with this character.
yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've always appreciated about in Elseworlds is like you get these moments where you don't expect it sometimes, right? Like you mentioned Guy, dying in your first volume. Typically as a fan, you're like, oh, that won't happen unless it's set up like a deceased or like you said, Injustice
Event,
kind of,
yeah.
you know, but like that right off the bat, then you kind of are set the stage of like, oh, anything can happen in this universe that you and Christian are creating here,
Yeah,
which
I
I
mean,
think makes it
in issue
exciting.
one of the second series, somebody from DC dies, and they ain't coming back.
And I was like, oh, we're just starting right off the gun here with
Yeah, why
volume.
not? Why not?
I love it. I love that. I love that aspect.
Yeah.
And one of the things that like we mentioned earlier, you've always been a fan of these characters. I will say it seems like though in comics that this year seems like it's a year of Godzilla. Like I'm seeing all these Godzilla comics. What is it about these, legendary characters that I think resonates with people so well? For you at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think for virtually everybody, it goes back to your childhood. I
Yeah.
think these things that make a bigger impression have made an impression on people for, 50 plus years, 50 to 70 years. I don't, was it 50, 1950? I can't remember what year the first Godzilla came out, but 57 maybe? I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, but it's a long time ago, a long
Yeah.
time ago, you know? Um, so I think it just, people want to see this stuff, and then of course you have the movies. I think, um, we had two, in 2023, we had the two Godzilla movies,
Right.
and one was like, Oscar worthy, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think it was really in the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
so it's not surprising that Marvel wants to jump on the bandwagon, and you know everybody else, because
Yeah.
people like this stuff. I mean, I hope there's not, big monster fatigue after this. We've got 7 issues to go, or 6 issues to go.
Okay, so it's a 7 issue series this volume is. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I listen, with what you're doing, I can't imagine people are gonna get fatigue on it because I'm loving it. And you're opening in a completely different world that I think some than a lot of those other comics that are, the stories that are being told too by utilizing the entire world of DC too. And I think this has just been a lot of fun. So
Yeah, and I don't think they don't have Rodan, they don't have Ghidorah,
right.
and I think one of the advantages that in this storyline is in issue one, you've got, I made King Shark huge, right? So there's some fun new places to go moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, when you went that route, I was like, "Oh, this is an interesting take I've never seen, but it makes sense." Like as a fan, you're like, "Okay, yeah, I this checks out."
Yeah,
So,
I mean, come on, you don't always want to see somebody like this, fighting someone this small, like.
right, 'cause you're like, "Oh, well, Superman and Supergirl or Wonder Woman, they're all powerful, but they're still like little tiny." So you're like, "No, you want to see something big or the mech suits and but you
Yeah,
had to think of a new way to do it." And I appreciated that. So,
yeah, for sure.
I want to transition a little bit here cuz I would be remiss you have a new series coming out from Mad Cave. Eat Your Young. Talk to me about this one because the people need to know about this series.
Well, you tell me. You read the first 2 issues. I'll give the elevator pitch, and then you can tell me what your impressions
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
So the pitch is basically it's a world. It's sort of like Highlander meets Succession. You
Mhm.
know, it's a world where there are these immortal clans that there's an alpha, and for as long as the alpha is immortal, all his children cannot die. But every 100 years for one moon cycle, 27 and a half days, they all become mortal. And during that time, if one of the alpha's children kill him and or her, if the alpha can be female, um, if they kill him and drink the blood from his heart, they become the alpha. And so everybody else in their family becomes mortal at that point. So it's zero sum. So you have a 2,000-year-old sort of like uh, warlord, think like Conan kind of warlord who has done this now over 200 times. He's killed his kids, all the ones who challenged him over the last 2,000 years. He's killed, and he decides he's done, and he names an heir, and his other 30 children have something to say about it.
Yeah. I mean, gang, you're not wrong. I remember you sent when we were talking about this interview, you're like, I got a new series coming out. Check out these issues. And you sent me issue one first. I was like, oh, and I think I even said like, I love this setup. Like great world building here. Like this is a lot of fun. And you said, cool, let me send you issue number two. And I think my response was, holy cow, it goes buck wild in the second issue. And when you said Highlander meets Succession, it is spot on, right? Like it is a great way to describe it. Uh, so where did this idea come about? Like, do you have a memory of like where you like? I know sometimes like ideas come everywhere and things, but
Yeah, I think I really wanted to do something that was like a throwback action, concept with a big cast. I wanted to throw like hand-to-hand weapons in it. And so I think that's where it started from. I always like familial stories. I think, grounding something in these personal sort of like, you know, family issues
yeah,
is a great way to go. And then I was even thinking about things like, Con Air, where you have like a movie with like the casting is the backstory, right? You see, Steve Buscemi as a serial killer, or like all these different characters, um, and they're like these tropes, but it's fun. And I'm not saying that Con Air was the greatest movie ever, but it was a fun movie,
it's a lot
and
of fun.
it had a big cast of like tropey archetypes. And so I kind of want to do my spin on something like that by having like, in Eat Your Young, there's a vigilante that's kind of like Daredevil, Batman. That's one of the kids. There's a Bonnie and incestuous Bonnie and Clyde. There's a basically Ian Fleming is one of the characters. So I wanted to like have these really cool, identifiable
Mhm.
archetypes, and then do something interesting with them, within their different relationships with the rest of their siblings.
Yeah. And how long of a series is this is planned out for?
It's six.
Okay.
I mean, if it does well, we'll go further.
Yeah,
I
because you
think.
could absolutely there's world building that you could do off of this 100% for sure.
Yeah, it could definitely go on for a while. I think we just live in a time where the realities of,
Right.
500 comics a month in the stores and the economics of it, it's very hard to get beyond one volume. So I'm hoping that, it finds its audience and it does well enough that we can continue.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you hear this concept, because like that's why I asked like how did this come about? Because like I'm envisioning you just like sitting there watching Succession or the Royal Tenenbaums. I'm like, that's awesome, but what happens if they killed each other?
Yeah, I'm sure that the original concept happened while I was watching the end of Succession. For sure. Because I have a couple other concepts that I felt like were kind of like this meets Succession. Like I don't know why, but there's something about that really resonated with me.
That's so good. At least you weren't watching The Bear or something that time, and it's just a whole bunch of chefs fighting each other till the death.
I have watched The Bear though, but
Yeah.
hasn't inspired me to write any cooking stories.
So how do you come about with your teams then for like eat your young versus I know like when you do something like a DC those usually are more created by editors and teams and stuff. How do you kind of come about your teams for your independent comics?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's just what do you have a past relationship with the
Okay.
artist? Like in the case of Eat Your Young, the artist is Matteo Monaco. And so he stepped in for volume 2 of Chicken Devils.
Mhm.
Volume 1 was Hayden Sherman, and then when we did the second series, Hayden was no longer available. And so uh, there was some artists who were working with Aftershock at the time, and I really responded to what he was doing. So I asked him, if he wanted to work on it, and I also was like, but I also want you to color yourself. Um, and I don't think he had done it before, but I think it's his art looks even better now that he's sort of in control of the whole process.
Yeah. Well, it works. I completely forgot that Hayden did the first volume of Chicken Devil.
Yeah.
Oh, it was great. Which was literally I talked about it last time we talked. That was how I kind of got exposed to your work was through Chicken
Mhm.
Devil and that universe that you created. And you've done all these different series like that and your time at DC and then your stuff with No One. For you, is there a wheelhouse that you kind of like to fall into of getting to work with these IP properties, or do you kind of feel like you thrive when it gets to be something like in something original that you create, or is there a balance?
I mean, I think it's a balance.
Okay.
I think any writer wants to create their own worlds to some degree, right? So, um, and opportunities to write IP, they don't always come around, you know what I mean? So, like, especially when something really cool, um, is presented to you, you want to consider it. I hadn't written DC characters in a few years, so getting the opportunity to write DC characters and MonsterVerse was it was freaking awesome. I'm hoping it does well when we do a third series. I'll keep writing until people are sick of it.
So what you're saying is you can have ideas for multiple volumes if people are around for this.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you'll
100%,
take it
100%.
wherever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is there for you, are there certain characters, like IP characters, like you've gotten to write a lot of IP characters. Are there some that like are still on your list that you'd love to hit someday, or like you're like, I've kind of hit what I wanted
Well,
to?
I've never written for Marvel. Like growing up, I was a Marvel fan. I was a big Marvel fan.
Mhm.
Like Simonson Thor. Claremont and Byrne X-Men was my favorite. Like just all those. Frank Miller on Daredevil. Like just all the classic ones from the 70s and 80s. Um, So, like, I have a lot of love for those characters. Unfortunately, I have not read a Marvel book in forever, so I have no idea what's going on over there. So, that would be it would be an undertaking to
Yeah.
to sort of find a lane, because there's been so much good stuff. They've done a lot of good stuff, but I'm not just not as versed in what they're doing,
Mhm.
like in the past 15 years.
Yeah.
Marvel, yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I've always appreciated too about, the series that you're working at DC that I feel like has got to also be cool is, rereading this to get ready for this second volume. I was in the trade, there's all the cover galleries of all the variants that are done. And you want to talk about like how do you pick and choose which one to get? Because those are some fantastic covers.
Yeah, DC has like a guy that's his job is to get like a variance, right, and find good artists and for the books and match, mix and match and stuff. And so I think it was also a case where like, a lot of artists had never gotten a chance to draw Godzilla and Kong. So I think, a lot of people said yes when they were given the opportunity to do covers. So yeah, there were some that are just so good.
Oh,
So good.
so good. Well, Brian, I want to respect your time. I feel like we could talk about this universe forever. Is there anything that we haven't gotten to talk about that you wanted to hit on, past work or stuff coming up that you can, or is it just right now, eat your young and Justice League Godzilla Kong?
Yeah, I mean that's really it. I mean, just for the no one fans out there, we're almost finished with the script for the feature that we're doing. I'm hoping that this year we can continue to move forward and get that true crime superhero documentary uh, done. So,
Nice.
yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, if you have not checked out No One, I think the trade still because that just came out at the end of this year of the last year, right? The
yeah,
trade.
yeah, yeah.
So you should be able to pick that up. online or at your local shops. Brian, where can people follow along with you, stay up to date with what you're working on?
Yeah, I'm on I guess Instagram and Blue Sky. Brian Booch, BrianBooch phonetically. Yeah, that's where you can reach me. I
Awesome.
also have a website like brianbooch.com, so I think you can email me there too.
Perfect. Well, gang, if you have not checked out Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong Volume 2 yet, or Volume 1, check out Volume 1 first and then come back and check out Volume 2. And then make sure at the time of this recording, FOC, I'm sure is open now, right? For Eat Your Young, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
It comes
put
out
it
in
on your pull
August, so
list. Like indie books live and die by pre-orders. Like, so put it on your pull list. If you're not sold on this, like, I don't know what's going to sell you on it from our conversation about that book, but trust me, you want to put it on your pull list.
thanks,
So
man.
call your LCS and put Eat Your Young Mad Cave Studios on there. Man, Brian, thanks so much just for taking some time to talk about comics with me.
Of course, man. When the two series are over, we can follow up and do a wrap up.
Let's do it. Let's make it
Yeah,
happen. So, all
sounds good.
right, with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.